Hey guys, and welcome back to my channel. In today's tutorial, I'll be showing you how to make this cute DIY felt cyborg doll. He's roughly 4.5 inches tall and approximately 2 inches wide. So let's get started. For this project, you will be needing gray felt, black felt, brown felt, and a little bit of blue and red felt. You'll also be needing brown, gray, and black thread, a circle cookie cutter or stencil, one black bead for the eye, a needle, scissors, a pen, a black and gray fine point Sharpie marker, some polyfill, and a hot glue gun. Okay, so to start off, I'm just going to pull out my pattern here and see what all I have. Okay, so first you're going to take your gray felt and your circle cookie cutter or stencil, and you're going to trace around it. This will be for the head. I trace around the outside of mine because once you get it stitched, it will be a little smaller than anticipated. For time purposes, I will not be showing me cutting out the duplicates of each of these items. You will need 2 of these circle gray pieces. Next, you're going to take your gray felt and we're going to cut out her body. And you'll be needing 2 of these pieces as well. And again, I suggest cutting it a little big because once you get it stitched and filled, it will be a little smaller than when you cut it. Alright, so you'll need 2 of these. Next, we're going to cut out the arms. And you will be needing 4 total pieces. Alright, next you're going to take your red felt and we're just going to cut a small circle out. This will be for one of his eyes. You can cut it a little big. We'll trim it down later if we need to. It's always better to have your pieces a little too big than a little too small. Alright, I'm going to make some room here. Get my pieces out of the way. You'll be needing your brown felt and you're going to cut out a circle. Again, I like tracing on the outside of mine because when I get it stitched it will be a little smaller. You'll only need 1 of these pieces. This will be for the front of his head. You'll also need a black circle, the same size as your brown one. And this will be for his hair and the back of his head. And you'll need to cut out a half circle here for the front part of his hair. It'll go on the front of his face. Get it the right shape that you want it. It doesn't need to be too long. You just want it big enough so that you can see that he has hair on the front of his head. There we go. Alright, so now I'm going to start stitching. You're going to take your body pieces and a piece of gray thread. You're going to tie a knot at one end. If I have a single piece of thread, normally I'll tie my knot about 5 or 6 times. You just want it big enough so that it doesn't get pulled through your felt. Alright, so I'm going to start stitching now. And for this whole project, we'll be using blanket stitching. If you don't know how to blanket stitch, you can click here in the top right of the screen and check out my tutorial where I will show you how to blanket stitch. Just going to stitch up the whole piece. Alright, I'm going to poke through with my stick here, get the pieces separated, and now you're just going to fill it. You don't want your body too stiff, but at the same time you don't want it too flat. So put just enough fluff in there so it's kind of right in between. Alright, you're just going to stitch up the rest of the piece here. Run it all along the top and down the side. Alright, knot it off, cut off the excess, and our body is done. Next, what we're going to do is we're going to put just a little bit of hot glue here on the back of his bangs, and you're going to glue his bangs down to his face. You're going to take your black thread and we're going to stitch his face to the hairpiece. Tie a knot at one end of your thread, and we will start blanket stitching the face to the hair. You're going to want to blanket stitch around the entire face. Leave a little spot open so we have enough room to fill it. Alright, so I've stitched around my whole face here. I'm going to go ahead and fill it up now. And again, just use your judgment on this filling. You don't want his face to be too fat and stiff, but at the same time you don't want it to be too flat and not have enough definition to it. I'm going to hot glue this part of my bangs down to my face because I forgot to do that. The whole front end here. Just hot glue it down to the face so it stays. I'm going to get this side too. Alright. And back to filling. You can use your polyfill stick too. Kind of poke it around in there, make sure you get the fluff in every spot. Finish stitching it up. Then tie it off and cut off your excess. Alright, there's the face so far. We have a little more to do before we're completely done. Alright, so we're going to work on the gray part of his face. You're going to take this circle piece here, and you're going to draw on the back of it this little, like, sort of like a pizza slice shape. And get that cut out. So when we glue it to the back of our face, it will look like this. Alright, put a little bit of glue here up the middle. Get that glued down nice and secure. Run some on this side. And glue that down. Alright, before we do anything else with our face, we're going to go ahead and glue our head to the body here. Make sure it can fit up in there nice and easily. You're going to put hot glue here at the very top of the body. You're going to glue the face down to the body. Alright, so this is what we have so far. We're going to work on the front of his mask, I guess you could say. Although it's not really a mask. Not entirely sure what it is. I guess it could be kind of like a helmet. So you're going to trace this out here on your gray piece. I have this little shape, how I want the front of my mask to look. Once you get this traced on, you can get it cut out here. Alright, so here's our helmet type piece. Need it laid down. It should look sort of like this. It doesn't have to be perfect. What we're going to do is we're going to take some hot glue. You're going to run it up here, middle of your helmet piece. You're going to set it down. Make sure it's in line with your back piece. So now what we're going to do is we're just going to start hot gluing this gray piece to his face. Just put a little bit of hot glue here and there. You don't have to put it right up next to the outside of the circle because we're going to stitch that. You just want to get all this on the inside here. Run some down this thin piece. Make sure it gets nice and stuck so it doesn't go anywhere while we're stitching it. Okay, and a little bit more hot glue here on this side of your thin piece. You're going to stick that down, make sure it gets stuck down to the brown part of his face and not to the other gray piece. Alright, you're going to take some of your gray thread. we're going to tie a knot at one end of our thread. And what we're going to do is we're going to blanket stitch the gray pieces together. So when you stitch, make sure you only get the gray pieces. Don't let it run through the face. Go directly from one gray piece to the other. There we go. And you're just going to stitch up to his body. Alright, so I've stitched up to my body. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to push my needle underneath here and run it through my body and my face and get it to the other side. Try to make sure it all stays underneath so you don't see any of it up top. Alright, once I get that through, I'm going to continue blanket stitching the rest of my gray piece here. Just going to stitch it all the way up to where it stops. Alright, so tied a knot here, just to hold that secure there. What I'm going to do is, I'm going to take my needle, push it through the side of my face here, and bring it out the back of the head. I'm going to tie a knot back here. And we'll leave that. Don't cut off your thread yet, because we will need that later. So now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take a little bit of hot glue and glue down the back of the head to his body. Alright, so while that's drying, what you're going to do is you're going to take some of your gray felt and you're going to cut out 2 of these small oval shapes. And these will be details on the side of his head. Alright, so I've got these cut out. I'm going to set it up here just to make sure it's the right size that I want. Once you get 2 of these cut out, you're going to take your black fine point Sharpie and we're going to draw a smaller oval on the inside of the gray felt piece. You want to try to get them both the same size so they somewhat match. Make this one just a little bigger. Alright, there's those pieces there. What we're going to do is you're going to thread up your needle again. You're going to push your needle in the back here, put your eye on. When you bring your needle out, try to get it right up next to the gray piece. You're going to do that about 3 times. Here's our eye. We're going to tie a knot. Try to get it right up next to that gray piece so it's not as noticeable. You're going to knot this off and push your needle in as far down as you can get it. You're going to pull all this thread as tight as it'll go so you have very little of it through your needle. You're going to cut it right up next to the needle there, pull it through, and you can't see your thread anymore. Alright, now that we have our eye on, I'm going to put just a little bit more hot glue up here underneath my bangs so that sticks. Alright, and hot glue some more of your gray piece down if you need to. Just make sure it's nice and secure there. Alright, we're going to take our red piece for his other eye. You can see how large it is up next to the bead. If it's too big, you can cut it down just a little bit. You want it pretty close to the size of your bead. It can be a little larger, but you don't want it too much larger, and definitely not smaller than the bead. Alright, that size should work. I'm going to put some hot glue on the back of my red robot eye here and stick it down to the side of his face. Make sure it gets nice and stuck. Okay, now we're going to glue our side details onto the sides of his face. So put just a little bit of hot glue on there and stick it down. Make sure it gets nice and stuck onto here. You're going to do that same exact thing with the other piece. We're going to put just a little bit of hot glue on and glue it to the side of his face. Try to get it pretty even with the other one that you've already stuck. Alright, so there's that. Next we're going to work on some more details. So cut just a really small circle with your blue felt. It's going to go right there in the middle of his face. When you get that circle cut, you're going to put some hot glue on the back of it, and we're going to glue it down to a large piece of gray felt. Once that's nice and stuck, you're going to cut around this blue piece. You want to see some of the gray felt, so don't cut it right up next to the blue, but you don't need to see too much of the gray. Just enough to know that it's actually under there, and it's not just a piece of blue. It's going to stick right there in the center. Once you make sure it's the size you want it, put some hot glue here, and very carefully stick it down in the middle of his face. Alright, now we're going to do the mouth, and it's going to be a little tricky. So you're going to take a longer piece of black thread, bring the two ends up, and tie a knot. If my thread is doubled over, normally I'll only tie a knot 2 or 3 times, just so the knot is large enough so that it won't slip through your felt. Thread your needle. This is going to be kind of hard. I'm going to take my needle in through the back of the head, here where the gray meets the black, and push it under there. I'm going to trace out my mouth here so it's a little bit easier. Alright, I'm going to push my needle through and bring it out on my traced lines. When I push it back in, I'm going to make sure it comes out right here where the gray meets the black. I'm going to push it back in the same spot and bring it right back out where the gray meets the black. This way you can't see all the little lines that we're stitching on the back of his gray helmet. It'll look a little nicer this way, though it's a little more complicated. Once I get the first layer done, I'm just going to stitch over it again. Alright, so here I've doubled my stitching. I've stitched over it once, then I stitched right over it again. Now I'm going to tie a knot here in my thread. I'm going to push my needle down into the back of the head. Pull all the extra, cut my thread, pull my needle through. Voila. Alright, now we're going to stitch up the arms. So you're going to take your gray thread and we're going to blanket stitch all the way around the arm here. Take it right up to the other side and then stop at the top so we can fill it. Alright, I'm going to take my stick, I'm going to push it down and separate the two felt pieces. I'm going to take just a little bit of my fluff and poke it down in there. And again, you want your arms to be not too stiff, but at the same time you don't want them too flat. When you get it stuffed, thread up the rest of it. When you get to the end though, you're going to tie a knot. Do not cut off your excess thread yet, because we will need that for attaching the arms to the body. And this is what you should have. You should get both of your arms stitched up. Next, what we're going to do is we're going to work on some body details. So I have this long piece here, your red felt. You're going to cut this out. It kind of looks like a giant T. I guess you could imagine that. I'm just going to cut this out. And you want it to be kind of long. I'm going to cut off just a little bit here. And that's what I've got. It'll go right here on the front of his chest. Make sure it's the length you want it. You're going to put just a touch of hot glue up at the top. Stick it down. Try to get it up under the face if you can. If you can't, it's no big deal. Run some hot glue down the bottom and stick it to the body. Alright, so now I'm going to work on the arm details. So you've got both your arms and you've got your two fine point Sharpie markers. First, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with the black. I'm just going to add some detail onto this arm to make it look more like a robot arm. For time purposes, I'm not going to show the entire process, but I will show the finished product. Alright, moving on, I'm going to work on face and body details. Again, for time purposes, I'm not going to show the entire process of this, but you will get a good look at the after product. Alright, so here's my after product. I've got black and gray Sharpie mixed on the body, just gray Sharpie on the front of the face and the back of the face as well. Nothing on the back of the body. Now I'm going to add my arms. You can either hot glue or stitch them on. I've done them both ways and they both work great. If you choose to use hot glue, just cut off your excess thread, put some hot glue on the bottom of the arm, and stick them on. I'm going to stitch mine on, so I'll see you in a sec. Alright, our cyborg doll is done. Thank you guys so much for watching this tutorial. I hope you enjoyed it. Please be sure to subscribe and click the notification bell so you never miss an upload. I try my best to get a new video out every Wednesday. I'd love to hear your thoughts and ideas as well. If you have any dolls that you would like to learn how to make, please comment down below and I'll do my best to make your request. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.